Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional, providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, I'm Justin Daniels here. I am a shareholder and corporate M&A and tech transaction lawyer at the law firm Baker Donaldson, advising companies in the deployment and scaling of technology. Since data is critical to every transaction, I help clients make informed business decisions while managing data privacy and cybersecurity risk. And when needed, I lead the legal cyber data breach response brigade.
And this episode is brought to you by Wimpy, Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, e-commerce, professional services, and digital media. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more and to check out our best-selling book, Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time, visit redcloveradvisors.com. So you want to know what's interesting? I have the notes in our Zoom little box flip-flopped today, and it is throwing me for a massive loop. If anyone wants to challenge themselves, just move the screens of how you normally do things, and you will be challenged. This is very tricky.
Well, you have to learn flexibility. Well, you know what? Given our topic today, I think it's good because sometimes when we encounter an unfamiliar kind of security risk, we need to be flexible in our approach and not be so wedded to the way we've done things.
There we go. All right. Well, so then we should actually talk about what we're going to talk about today. So we have two people. We have some co-founders. We have Ian Riopel, who is the CEO and co-founder of Root, applying Agentic.
Agentic.
I can't speak because it is flip-flopped.
No.
Agentic AI to fix vulnerabilities instantly. A U.S. Army veteran and former counterintelligence agent. He's held roles at Cisco, CloudLock, and Rapid7. And we have John Amaral, who is the CTO and also co-founder of Root. Previously, he scaled Cisco Cloud Security to $500 million in revenue and led CloudLock to a $300 million acquisition. With 5 exits behind him, John specializes in building cybersecurity startups with strong technical vision. Welcome to the show, John and Ian.
Thank you, Justin and Jody. Appreciate being here.
Hello. Thank
Will
you.
Stop laughing at me. You can't laugh at me.
Oops.
I admitted I made a mistake. You should be so proud.
Yes, that's about, I think in the last, 15 years I've known you, that might be about the 13th time only.
Well, at home's a little bit different than at work.
Fair enough.
Your turn.
All right. Well, could each one of you share with us a little bit about your career journey to where you're at now?
Sure. Yeah. So I think you did a fantastic job of teeing us up. So thank you. So John and I, as you probably saw, there's a decent amount of overlap. We've been on a few different companies with each other and startups. And, we created Root to take a very different approach and how the industry and how everyone should be thinking about solving vulnerabilities and the vulnerability remediation problem. And so kind of leading up throughout our careers, my background working in military intelligence and then a series of cybersecurity startups. John and I kind of mind melded here, and over the last couple of years, we've kind of gotten Root off the ground. So I think we'll dig into that here in a minute. But
Awesome.
Same with my background. I think you had most of it. What propelled us to try to tackle this problem is just, I guess, historical discomfort and unhappiness with how the vulnerability remediation goes in general. I mean, it's find a lot of things and fix a few, and I just wanted to invert that problem and make it fix all the things and deal with a few. And that's what we've tried to do here. Everything in my career has led up to that.
We talk a lot about automation and security. And there's kind of the question I feel, right? What does truly effective automated security actually look like? And are we close to achieving it?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because one of the compelling things that kind of got Root off the ground was John and I were walking around at Black Hat a couple of years ago, something like that, and
Yeah, something like that.
we're looking at all the vendors and everyone's talking about software supply chain security, and there's very early on mentions of AI and this idea of more effective triage. Certainly we're hearing more and more about this concept of reachability analysis, but the whole market still is starting from this presumptive position where you're going to start with this massive list of work that needs to be done and a tremendous amount of technical debt. And the whole thought process was, well, what filters can I apply to help get that to an output of work that is achievable by my organization? And then that way I might actually be able to fix and solve those problems. And a lot of the automation was really focused around that filtering and triaging aspect of things. And the way we've thought about it is we said, well, what if we just kind of fixed everything, and then whatever happens to be left because there's something that's net new or novel, that's where you should really be focusing your time and spending less time on all the triage, because the triage isn't actually fixing anything. And so that's where Root kind of came out of, and where we that was kind of the first principles that we started with. And when we think about automation, we're not thinking about it in that aspect of triage. We're thinking about how do we basically completely eliminate the tech debt that has to do with patching, which gets rid of a huge amount of vulnerabilities, certainly in the context of your software supply chain.
So, Ian and John, can I add this, maybe framing this up a little different for our audience who may or may not be familiar with agentic AI? So, is it fair to say that, for example, one of the chief causes of cyber risk is companies don't do their patching because they don't have enough resources, and it gets put down the list, and threat actors are like, hey, they didn't patch their software. We can just go and exploit an existing vulnerability. And it sounds like in a real world example, what Root can do is help with the use of artificial intelligence to say, okay, how can maybe we automate some of these functions like patching so that the team doesn't have to think about that as much. And then the AI helps figure out, okay, where do we best implement our human resources, and how can we automate things like patching, which, it's just downloading whatever the latest software is. Is that kind of a real world example of how Root could really help a customer with a cyber problem about how to really deploy their assets more efficiently?
That's almost exactly perfect. I'll grab this quickly just because I want to talk about the AI angle. So
please.
When you're using third-party software like open source, and not the code you write, but the code you pull into your software, and that can be manifested as container images. That's like the common way software gets deployed to production today. It's through container images. When you scan those images, you get myriad vulnerabilities there, and that just is a list of work to do. We've applied AI agents in a way that allows us to patch any of those vulnerabilities away, and it comes in two forms. One is we look at and understand what kinds of patches are available, say from just the ecosystem, right? You're working on Debian Linux. There's some patches available. Should I use them or not? It's a big question because you can break stuff. Our agents understand which of those are best to use and tries to apply the ones that are most reliable. Second, oftentimes you run into situations where there is no patch for that vulnerability in the version of software you're using. It might exist in a newer version, but I don't want to switch to that newer version because it's going to break my software. It's got all new features in it, and I don't know. I haven't really tested with it. So our agents can generate net new patches for versions of software that don't have any. And they do it in a few different ways, but one common way is they look to future versions, say 2.0, and I'm on 1.3.1. I look in 2.0, I see what they've done to fix the vulnerability there, and we do something called backporting it. So it's not just about upgrades. It's about finding ways to patch to solve the problem of the vulnerability through a combination of either upgrades or these root generated patches. And that's what our fleet of agents does behind the scenes. So you just show us your container image through our platform. We look at it, we analyze it, we decide a patching strategy for that. We upgrade it to whatever patches are available and we believe will work. And we do a lot of testing and analysis to do that. And then for all the rest, we make patches for you. And then they're there and you get all your vulnerabilities gone. And so that eliminates like 95% of the kind of issues that people care about, maybe even more. We have customers that go way further than that. And then engineers now are focused on the remaining bits. There may be two left that we have to think about because, well, it's impractical to patch it or there's some constraint you have to deal with. But their job now is much more focused on what's real in their world from a perspective of what hasn't been taken away. And that changes the workload and the whole specter of how you deal with vulnerabilities.
I think I'll just add one thing, which is to emphasize like it seems very simple to say just upgrade, right? Just do your patching. The reality is a lot of organizations don't do that. It's becoming much more of a consideration now that there's been significant maturing from a compliance standpoint. This is something that PCI DSS4 now requires. The CRA inside Europe is now requiring compliance around SBOMs and meeting the SLAs that you're laying out. More and more, it's becoming a topic of conversation as folks SOC 2 audits. And these upgrades that John's talking about are not trivial, for most folks, because as you start to make these changes, it's not uncommon for these changes to require what we call a breaking change, right? So if I make that upgrade, it breaks my software. And now all of a sudden that's a significant engineering effort and friction point. And so that's the reason why a lot of companies get stuck in this legacy state or old software because they don't want to break anything production. And unfortunately, the vulnerability didn't necessarily out prioritize that next feature or the stability. So what's changing here is the speed and pace and the capabilities that we're able to bring to market now, whereas SLAs used to take, or for a good organization would follow, say, a 30, 60, 90, patching a critical vulnerability within 30 days, maybe taking upwards of 3 months plus time. Those time points can now be compressed into hours and delivered very easily or even passively effectively from a developer standpoint because of some of the big innovation in the automation and the agentic AI that we've built.
So kind of asking another question, because I was literally talking to one of my MSSP clients about using AI and software tools. So for example, with intrusion detection, so think about taking a vast volume of logs and being able to run that through a process to identify, hey, there's some unusual traffic when you connect these disparate dots that suggest there could be a threat actor in this network that's doing its recon before it engages in its mayhem. Can you talk a little bit about, is this another use case that your tool addresses? Because one of the challenges that I'm seeing as someone who vets tools for clients as well as uses the tools is many times the tool's great, but you kind of have to come up with the use cases.
Our tool is not built for that use case. I can tell you that in general, my experience of building with these kinds of AI tools for a long time now suggests that it could be good at that, but it's not what we directed our application towards. The key use cases around our solution are really about software security and software and software supply chain security lifecycle. You build your software, it's vulnerable because you incorporate code that's vulnerable. Ours acts on that code and acts on patching that code in a way that creates a better posture. And for instance, if you're trying to sell into the federal government, you're subject to FedRAMP compliance. And FedRAMP compliance requires that you continuously monitor and patch all of the software for the kinds of risks that I just mentioned, which are I've baked in security vulnerabilities into my code. They've got to go away. So as Ian mentioned, they have strict timelines on how fast you have to remove those vulnerabilities, or else you can't operate a federal service. They just won't let you sell into the government. And there are other similarly strict compliance regulations around fintech and around healthcare and around retail that require that you have no critical or high vulnerabilities in your code. This is sort of really setting, I'd say, the risk surface of your software differently. The use case you mentioned is, hey, from a vast sea of log data, can I detect perhaps a lateral movement potential for an attacker in my realm? The the good thing about AI, agentic AI, especially with larger and larger context windows, I think, Google has upward of like a 1 million or 4 million token context window now. You can put all that context in and it can find needles in haystacks very, very well. So I think there are companies actually that are applying it to that sort of use case, but ours is more on the software supply chain security side.
I think one thing I would mention, right, is there's different ways to, as John said, there's different, AI is a very broad term, right? And I think that's honestly one of the things that we find ourselves when we were just at a Gartner conference last week, and everyone says they do AI, right? It's the new zero trust in the security world. Everyone does it. But when you dig a little bit deeper, it can be a very wide. It's like saying you're a doctor, right? Like you can be a generalist or you can be a hyper specialist in one specific area. The way that we leverage AI tends to be more the specialist area because of how critical this is to. It's the foundation of what everyone's building on, right? Literally, it's the foundation of the house of your business, or what your service you're delivering, and so. The better way to what we've built internally is think of it less as like an LLM style generative AI, and more of it as we've built a fleet. We actually internally call it a platoon. We used like a military kind of structure, and we have a number of different agents that work together and coordinate to come up with strategies and approaches to find and build and create and deliver sophisticated patches that are trustworthy, with full provenance and full transparency in how that's being delivered. And behind the scenes, it's extraordinarily complex, but the experience from a user's perspective is it's not unusual for us to hear it's like magic. It just works. So that's not to say we use LLMs internally. We use all the LLMs, right? But the product itself is not just a reinterpretation of the LLM. These agents are quite sophisticated. They have tool belts that we've built sophisticated tools for that they can do a whole different number of things.
So you've mentioned your tools, real world use case, which is really related to software vulnerability, specifically patching. Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about agentic AI, and a lot of people are worried out there that, hey, AI is either going to replace my job. Talk to us a little bit about what are some of the limitations where you really still need that skilled cyber professional to basically use it as a tool to enhance his or her abilities, not simply, as you pointed out, just substitute for their judgment.
Yeah, so I'll let John double click here in a second, but what I would just say is we're not replacing people's jobs per se, because a lot of this isn't happening already, right? Like people have jobs and companies are still struggling already to hit these SLAs and are struggling to operate we're not seeing the number of supply chain and patching and vulnerabilities that get owned or pwned that had a patch available for it. We're not seeing that go down, right? It's still going up exponentially. So this is more about enabling teams and companies to be able to focus their time where they already are, right? Which is trying to be as effective as possible around feature delivery, stability, going to market with a better product, while trying to stay compliant. This is more about, rather than just being in a very reactive state all the time when there's just a new 0-day kev exploit that CISA puts out and says everyone must drop everything and fix this. And staying ahead of that and letting a vendor like us and our solution like us actually solve those problems for you proactively, which is really where very rarely do we come across an organization that says this is. As a matter of fact, we've never come across an organization that says this is what we want to do really well is patching, right? It's never a thing. So
I like nautical analogies, and so sailing a boat's really hard, right? You got a crew. They need to do a lot of work, especially on a big sailboat, to just get it to go to the place they want it to go. And that's hard, right? You got all kinds of specialists on there, navigators, folks who know how to sail, folks who know how to run all the mechanical systems, etc. These security issues are effectively like running that sailboat with like a hole in the hull, right? And what it does is it redirects everybody's attention to the hole, because that becomes the biggest problem. When sailing the boat is still hard and you still need to get where you're going. So I would say that in general, people have been ignoring the leak in the hull and assuming that they can just get away with that. We're giving tools that don't allow them to not have leaks in the hull. Effectively, they've got vulnerabilities, they've got issues. We can take those away, and all of the awful work that goes along with dealing with that kind of problem, so they can just run the boat. And securing and kind of tying that back to software. You've heard of the word shift left, right? Like shift left's a term in kind of engineering now. It's like, which in this world means the security people find priorities and they push them over to the left to the engineers and say, please fix those for us. That's effectively the hole in the hull. The engineers don't like to fix it. What they want to do is sail and sail fast. These are performance sailors. They want to build the real solution. They want to build top line value. They want to build software. And when you're pulling time away from them to fix these vulnerabilities, it's hard. They don't like doing it. It's specialist work. It takes security specialty. So we're basically deburdening that. And our mantra is don't shift anything left that you can automate away, because that, especially in this context, means taking the engineers off of building the software that powers our business, getting us to the place we want with the sailboat. So we're a welcome tool in organizations that use us, because they get to focus on the stuff they really believe is worthy of their time. And as Ian mentioned, a lot of these companies have stacks of vulnerabilities that are in kind of like the I wish I could fix them place, thousands of these. And we make that list go to like 3. And they're happy about it, so they can keep on sailing fast.
Do you have a follow-on question?
You look like you did, and I've done most of the talking, so I know, and I think I need to.
But I don't want to
my co-host. It's an AI topic, and it's always interesting. I want to listen to us there. I'm deferring to my co-host.
Well, I was going to ask John and Ian our question that we always ask, which is, what is your best personal privacy or security tip? So not one that you would offer to a company, but you're hanging out with non-privacy and security people and they know what you do. What might you tell them that they should do?
I can go first.
Yeah, go for it, John.
Personal privacy and security tip is password manager, password manager, password manager. Be diligent. Get that thing, put all of the stuff in there, make a really long, hard, one password, and diligently like apply it everywhere, so that you never have this kind of like simple passwords, written down password, anything like that. Just make it all digital. Get a company you trust, make sure that's backed up. Take those little keys they give you, all those special keys that happen when you forget what you're doing, like store those off somewhere really private and safe. But really manage passwords well, because we know that's like a big problem forever and always will be. And not for me, it isn't though. I'm diligent with my passwords.
I was going to say the same exact thing with the plus of 2FA on everything. There's a lot of great 2FA tools out there now. If you don't want to use any specific one in particular, but there's some that are out there that are a lot easier to continue to use if you need to change phones, for instance. So there's a lot of different capabilities. It's worth taking an afternoon or an evening or whatever for your family and coming up with a solution and strategy and getting it rolled out for everyone. It's pretty inexpensive to free, and it's definitely a lot cheaper than spending days trying to yell at people and get money returned accounts.
Oh, and both Ian and I have not loaded TikTok on our phones.
Yeah, we're
Take that where you'd like to, but
we're
we
a
haven't
little
done
paranoid.
Do you want to give a sentence more on the why no TikTok?
Spying by China.
Didn't ask you.
Yeah,
I asked
whatever.
them.
Yeah, well, that's the answer. That's the answer.
There's a reason why TikTok's not allowed on most executive and or government devices, right? And when you think about the type of capabilities that exist, the amount of data that our phones can collect at any given time, it doesn't even have to be your engagement with the app directly, the types of information that can be collected about you. So it's I occasionally get made fun of by some of my friends. I'm a little paranoid in this realm. I literally have it blocked on my firewall. But what I would say is every time someone walks into my house that's on my guest Wi-Fi, I can see an alarming number of outbound activity going from their device, even when they're trying to reach back to those servers, even though they're not on TikTok. I'll just put it that way.
Well, you know what, Ian, you bring up a really interesting point, which is social uneasiness around saying, hey, I don't want those apps, and how people react to it, because that creates a barrier to people saying, I don't want to do that, because they want to conform, they want to be liked by other people. So you may not care, but I know from talking to other people, they felt bad by telling people, well, I don't use it for these reasons, because people think they're being overly paranoid. And it really creates this interesting social dynamic that impacts your security.
Great observation. 100%.
For sure. I would say I'm not one of those people that's like anti-social media. It's just where I know that there's a ton of information out there on all of us. We all know that, right? It's a question of, to the extent you can control some of that data and where it goes. I'm sure there are different people have different policies, and TikTok's one I'm not particularly comfortable with having all that information about my family or myself.
Choose wisely what you use. Now,
when you are not building Root and talking all things security, what do you like to do for fun?
It's usually, so obviously I'd love to spend time with the family whenever we can. Startup life is particularly hard, but we try to make the best of all of that. But John and I are definitely workaholics. We both enjoy, I don't want to speak on what he enjoys doing, but we both find ourselves any spare time, we tend to be out on our boats. We're both, John mentioned earlier, he loves, nautical themed. We may or may not end up still messaging each other security related stuff or work related stuff while we're out on the boat. But the change of scene is nice.
Starlink's a great enhancement to your boating and work life balance, which come together all the time. I have family, kids, 2 puppies. I like to boat, and I have I've been a guitar player since I was about 7 years old. So professionally play, mostly recreational now, like play in bars and bands kind of thing. But it's not for money; it's for fun.
Very exciting. Now, if people would like to learn more and connect, where should they go?
Yeah, so root.io is our website. And if anyone wanted to try out the application or the SaaS service, or it's ungated today, you can just go to app.root.io. Or obviously feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. John and I are both super available there. We'd love to engage.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.